There are over 1 billion computers in use today, stated by Gartner IT News. Now, most of those computers are going to be connected to the internet, and most of those are going to be using Ethernet cables. So the odds of you running into an issue with an Ethernet cable is pretty high. So it's probably a good idea if we go over the process of how to fix a cable, or even make one if you need to. So to start, we should probably go over the different parts of the cable, so you know what we're talking about when we get to the later portions. What we have here is a standard Ethernet cable. This one's already been stripped on one end. Now, if you look at the one that's probably connecting your computer right now, you have two RJ45 connectors, one on each end. Now this RJ45 connector is what we're going to actually learn how to do today. Other than that, we have a blue PVC sheath that this basically keeps the rest of the cable protected. And within this blue PVC sheath, we have 4 pairs of actual mini strands of cable. Each one of those has its own colored PVC sheath. Within that PVC sheath is a copper core. The copper core is the part that actually carries the data that you're going to be using to, say, connect to the internet, or for a voice over IP phone, make your phone calls. There's different hardware types of cables. You have your Cat5, your Cat5e, and your Cat6. Cat5 was started coming around about 2001 to 2003. Those cables were capable of 10 megabits per second to 100 megabits per second. That's pretty slow by today's standards. So the Cat5e and the Cat6 are both capable of 100 megabits per second, also known as 1 gigabit per second. The difference between the two is the Cat6 has 2.5 times more bandwidth. So if you're going to make a cable, you probably ought to go with the Cat6, because that's where the industry is going to be going. Now, there's 2 different types of cable per se for security purposes. You have your shielded twisted pair and your unshielded twisted pair. If you're making a cable for your home, you're not going to need the shielded twisted pair. It's just going to do further protection against EMI, and it's mostly for secure environments. The only difference is underneath the PVC sheath, it's going to have a braided metal sheath for the protection. Now that we've covered the different hardware aspects of the cable, let's go over the actual parts that make it talk. The differences between a straight-through cable and a crossover cable. Your straight-through cable, that's for connecting 2 devices that are not alike. Say your Linksys router at home and your computer, or a router and a switch. That's what you're going to use a straight-through cable for. But if you're going to try and connect 2 computers together, or say 2 routers, you're going to need a crossover cable. The only difference that makes up these different types of cables is the actual pinouts. The pinouts were created by the Telecommunications Industry Alliance. They came up with two different pinouts. You have your A standard and your B standard. If you're making a straight-through cable, you're going to be using the B standard on both ends. The B standard, T568B, is going to be labeled out as from pin 1 through 8 as white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, green, white, brown, brown. Now, the only difference between your A standard and your B standard is you just switch the oranges and the greens. So for the A standard, you have white, green, green, white, orange, blue, orange, white, brown, brown. And if you're going to be making a crossover cable, one of these on each end. That covers it for you. Now that we've covered the different pinouts of how to make a cable and what type of cable you're going to need, let's go over the tools and how to actually make the cable itself. Odds are you're going to want a pair of scissors, because your pair of scissors is what's going to actually give your cable the proper length that you want. And it makes it easier for when you actually start making the cable. Other than that, you're going to have a cable or an RJ45 crimper. This is what's going to put that RJ45 on the end of that cable. You need your RJ45, the actual connector, and you need your cable, obviously. Now, if we're actually going to make the cable or fix the cable, we're going to start by cutting off one of the ends, the bad end. Once we've cut off the end, you're going to want to strip that outer PVC sheath off about 2 inches down. Once you've stripped that outer PVC sheath off, you're going to start untwisting those pairs, and you're going to want to line them up into whatever standard you're about to make. Once you have them lined up, a good rule of thumb is to hold your thumb actually right at the end of the PVC sheath. at the tip of your thumbnail, that's where you're going to want to cut those off. Because once you do that, that's going to line it up right about, just right for when the end of the PVC sheet hits inside the RJ45 and the actual inner strand hits the end of the RJ45 for your connection. Once you have that and it's all lined up, grab your crimper. You're going to want to slide your actual cable and RJ45 connector into the crimper and crimp down. Check your cable afterwards, make sure that the copper cores are visually seen at the end of the RJ45 connector. If you have that on all 8, then your cable should be sound. Now that we've covered how to make the cable, we've covered what type of cable we need to make. So you should feel confident that if a problem comes up and you need to fix a cable, you're fully prepared. So